A page-turning thriller to throw in your beach bag this summer is The Wife Before by Shonora Williams. In The Wife Before, we meet Samira Wilder, a young woman who's down on her luck. But her life changes quickly when she meets a wealthy, handsome, and caring man named Roland Graham. Soon, they're married, and Samira can't wait to make a fresh start as the second Mrs. Graham. As Samira settles into the mansion she now calls home, she's blissfully happy until she discovers long-hidden journals belonging to Roland's late wife Melanie, who died in a tragic accident. But with each dusty page, Samira comes to realize that perhaps it was no accident at all. Determined to uncover the truth of Melanie's troubled last days, Samira realizes that her perfect husband is not as perfect as she thought. But the truth is not always what it seems. The Wife Before is a sexy, twist-filled psychodrama reminiscent of the classic Gothic tale Rebecca. And it's the perfect book to read this summer. The Wife Before by Shonora Williams is being published by Kensington Books, and it's a twisty thriller you really don't want to miss. Welcome to The Reader's Couch, a podcast that brings you lively conversations with some of your favourite authors and bookish personalities. Over here, the couch is always booked, but I've moved some books to the side table and fluffed some cushions so I can welcome a guest or two to come lounge with us. Today on the couch, we have Catherine McKenzie, and she's here to talk to me about her latest novel, Please Join Us. A psychological thriller that follows a New York City corporate lawyer who joins an elite women's club in order to advance her career. And she finds herself involved in blackmail, murder, and corruption. Stay tuned. Hi readers, welcome again to The Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is the author of numerous best-selling books, including I'll Never Tell and The Good Liar. But she's here to talk to me about her latest novel, Please Join Us. Please welcome to the couch, Catherine McKenzie. Hey, Catherine.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so excited, one, to have you here on the podcast, especially after the Epigraph Literary Festival. It was just such a joy to learn about your book, and I can't wait to discuss it even more.
Great. I'm here. Let's go.
Let's go. So before we get into the details of the book, I want to gauge your excitement. I mean, I know you've published books before, but with this one on the horizon, I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling? How excited are you?
I'm right before I start to get excited. I feel like promotion really ramps up sort of in the 3 months before. And so my book was supposed to come out in May, and it got pushed for pandemic related reasons. And so normally, it's a sort of 3-month lead up where you're doing lots of stuff like interviews like this, but that's been spread out over more time because things have been pushed. So.
Right, absolutely. But I really want readers to hear from you, Catherine. Tell us about your novel, Please Join Us, and what can readers expect going in?
Well, it's a novel about a lawyer who's 39 and she's struggling in her career. Everything had been going great, she thought, until she stumbled in her partnership, and she gets an opportunity to join an exclusive women's club, which she takes despite her husband's protestations that it might be a cult. And while everything seems to be going great at first, she soon learns that there's a price to pay for the benefits that she's reaping from this.
Right. So in the novel, we meet Nicole. She's the one who had the great law career. Then things started to kind of fall apart. But the membership club that she joins is called Panthera Leo. And what's super interesting to me is that the membership is anonymous. You know, no one knows what's going on. But for some reason, everyone in this group, they're super successful and they really help to push Nicole's career. So I know this is something she's needing, especially after things start to fall apart. But before we even get to Nicole
joining this membership association. Tell us a bit about her, who she is as a person, as a character, what's driving her, and ultimately what leads to her losing, things falling apart for her at her job.
Well, I think she's just a very career-oriented person who's and goal-oriented, and she's sort of always had her eye on this prize of being successful in her career and getting, to the partnership level and then moving her way up the partnership. And I think what she's discovering, as many women do, is that you can be the smartest person in the room, but that's not all that's at work there. And so she loses a big client, and as many of these firms do, they're sort of in a "what have you done for me lately" mode. And so she finds herself left-footed after feeling like everything was going the way it was supposed to. And she doesn't really have that much else going on in her life. She's married, um, and she has a happy marriage, but there's some tensions there. They live in an apartment that doesn't belong to them. It belongs to her husband's family, and the owner is about to die, and there's uncertainty about where they can go. And they've chosen not to have kids, but her husband's not necessarily okay with that decision. So she's got sort of a lot of tensions and things disrupting this sort of very not an easy flowing life. She's worked really hard for everything she had, but a life that was going in one direction, and she's kind of got it coming at her from all directions. And I think she feels uneven and unsteady, and that is the moment when you're vulnerable to people coming in and telling you that they have a solution for all your problems.
And that is what Panthera Leo offers her, essentially. Like I said earlier, all the people in this group, they're very successful. I mean, she's meeting actresses, a congresswoman, someone in finance. They're just spread out across all different industries and professions. And again, they're all really good. And now Nicole has a solution to her problem, especially where her career is concerned, because after joining this group and going to Colorado, she gets kind of like this revival. Now her career is on a good path. She's getting clients. Just her network is growing. And she even gets to move into a new apartment, which is a great thing, because before she had lost her home. Her and her husband had to move out. So tell us about Panthera Leo and what's that all about, and just your concept for this group.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a, as you said, a sort of anonymous, secretive networking group that promises a lot, but really delivers. So, when they approach her to join, again, they won't tell her who's in it, but they do promise her that every successful woman she knows is probably in the group. And she decides to take a leap of faith and go to Colorado to this retreat, and what they promise is actually true. The people who lead this organization, one's a former pop star who's kind of become a lifestyle guru, a la Gwyneth Paltrow, and another woman who owns a huge wellness company. And then, as you said, there's a congresswoman there. There's a top CEO, and people who can help her in her life. And so I think she connects with this group of women, and that is really the the promise that this group gives, is that they take their name and their inspiration from the female lion, and that's what Panthera Leo is. And it's the female lion that does the lion's share of the work, even though the men reap the rewards. They eat the lion's share of what they kill, but they're there to help one another, and that's really the idea behind it. Is they form what they call a pride, and they're there to be there for each other no matter what anybody needs. And if somebody asks for a favor, the answer immediately is yes. And so she goes from feeling a bit isolated and not having a big group of friends because she's been so focused on her career, to suddenly having not just work opportunities, but this new friend group of ambitious women who all want to succeed and all want to help her succeed.
Absolutely. Now, in return, there are some favors that are asked, most of which are just kind of very surface level, a bit benign, nothing crazy.
Right.
But then it gets crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not giving anything away because the book opens this way, but
Yes.
she gets called to the congresswoman's apartment, Athena, and there's a body, there's blood and a body in the apartment, and so we know that the Thabers are going to get pretty extreme pretty quickly, and then we circle back in time to her joining the group and how we got to that moment.
Absolutely. Okay, so because we are staying in spoiler-free territory, that's as far as I'm going to go with the novel. But I want to know, though, Catherine, what inspired you to tell this story? Where did the idea come from? What was the spark that kind of led you down the road to create, this anonymous association, to put Nicole in this position? And obviously, we see the rest of the story play out later on. But I really want to know what inspired you.
Well, I practiced law for many years. I retired. Retired. It sounds weird to say that. I'm in my 40s, but anyway, I retired from the practice of law during the pandemic. And but before that, I mean, and so I know the environment and I know the pressures that are put on people, and um, that the boys club that still exists, and I actually started a women's networking group in my practice in the sort of last 5 years, to sort of overcome that thing. So I guess that idea was already in my head. And then I did receive an invitation to an anonymous women's group that promised lots of important people were a member, and they wouldn't tell me who they were. And there was some experiences. I think one was in Idaho and the other was somewhere in California. I can't remember. And I vaguely thought about going, and my husband was like, "You're insane." And so I just filed it away, as writers do, right? And I mean, part of my thinking about going on that retreat in the first place was like, wouldn't this make an amazing opening for a novel? It'll just be book research. But I did not go. And a couple of years later, when I was sort of casting around for my next idea for a novel, I mentioned that to my then agent, and she perked up and was like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. Do something with that." And then I mentioned the idea to my editor, and she also was very curious about it. So, and I think that that's always what we're looking for as writers, an idea that sticks with us, but also that evokes a response in someone right away when you give it. There's nothing worse than giving your elevator pitch of your book, and someone going, "Oh, okay." You want someone to be like, "Oh, that sounds interesting." And so I took it from there. And I mean, I had deleted the email from that group. I don't remember what their name was. Like it was, so it's entirely an invention on my part, but that was the spark.
Right, right. Awesome. So I want to get deeper in your writing life, Catherine. How long did it take for you to write and pull together Please Join Us?
I mean, it usually takes me about a year to write a first draft of a thriller. Um, and that doesn't mean I'm writing on it every day. When I started Please Join Us, it was in 2020. I was still working as a lawyer. And I don't know about you, but I didn't have that much extra time or just
Mhm.
extra energy in my life, um, for writing. And I didn't get that much writing done, certainly in the first 8 or 9 months of that year. But yeah, it usually takes me about a year from concept. I spend time thinking about it. I'm not a big outliner, but I do spend time thinking about the book, and I need to see the end and think about who the main character is going to be and what the twists are going to be. And then I start writing, and I usually write in thirds. So I'll write the first third of the book, and I spend the most time there because I'm really fleshing out who the other people in the world are and what the conflicts are and what their personalities are. And then I'll write the second third, and I'll go back to the beginning, and then I'll write the last third, and then I'll do another sweep through it, and then that's just for a first draft that'll actually show to my editors. So I think there's that process is mine, and then once I turn it over before it gets into a bookstore, it's another year or year and a half.
Right, right. Okay. So, as I mentioned in my introduction, you're a best-selling author of numerous books. I'm personally familiar with The Good Liar and I'll Never Tell. But I'm curious, how was it similar to or different from writing and publishing your previous books in comparison to doing Please Join Us? I mean, I gathered the pandemic obviously altered a lot of things, from the writing process to even having your book publication date being pushed a
Hmm.
bit as well. But yeah, how was it similar to or different
Well,
between each
it's
book?
my last three books have been affected by the pandemic. So in 2020, my book "You Can't Catch Me" came out. It came out as scheduled in um, in the US, but the date was pushed in Canada because
Mhm,
of production issues. And so that meant I had a staggered release. I think it came out in June in the US and like in August or something in Canada. And then I was like, okay, well, this is only once. And and then last year, my book "Six Weeks to Live" came out,
mhm.
and it did come out on time, but right when I guess wave two or three was, I can't even remember the waves now. But anyway, some bad wave of COVID was hitting us. And most of Canada went into extreme shutdown. And so bookstores were closed and big box stores couldn't sell books. And there were no events. I'd scheduled a whole book tour and that all ended up online. So I mean, I'm hoping this is a bit different this time. I'm going on a book tour in person in August and September, and I'm actually doing some in-person events for 6 weeks to live in a couple of weeks. And so, I mean, that's the main difference, I think, is really being out, be able to get out and have contact with readers and other writers and that community that we haven't really seen each other that much in the last couple of years, and I miss that.
Right, right, absolutely. And just a reminder, you guys, just keep an eye on Catherine's website, catherinemckenzie.com. She has a news and events section on the website, so we can stay up to date there as well. But sticking into your writing life a bit, I want to know, what would you say is the most difficult part of your creative process?
I think it's always the middle of the book. The beginning of the book, you're very excited about the idea and the world that you're building, and in the end, for me anyway, I'm just wrapping up loose ends and I know where I'm going, and it all flows very quickly, and I often write the last third of my books very quickly. But the middle is where it's really work. That's where the work is, because we've all read books, right, that like start off with a good premise and then somewhere around the 150 page mark we're like, oh, this is boring, it doesn't go anywhere, or it's become predictable. and
Hmm.
and so I think that's really where you have to put almost the most focus in your writing to make sure that you have enough plot and twists and interest to get through what can be called the soggy middle of the book. So I always find that the hardest part and the slowest part is that sort of yawning gap between 30,000 and 60,000 words. And once I pass that, I'm like, okay, I can make it to the end of this book. I can finish it.
Right, right. Okay, that makes sense for sure. And looking back now, because again, you've had a quite you have quite a few books under your belt. Please join us, 6 weeks to live, You Can't Catch Me, I'll Never Tell, The Good Liar, and so on and so on. Um, if you could tell your younger writing self anything, maybe going back to the first book or even, midway or even before you dreamed of writing books, if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
I mean, I don't know if I would ruin it for my younger writing self, because, the first actually four novels that I wrote, because it took that long for me to get one sold, I wrote in my own sort of cocoon and without any expectations. And I wrote what I wanted to, and I wasn't thinking about what I should be writing. And it was just sort of, an outpouring of ideas. I wrote like four novels in 2 years. Um, and I was really just learning how to write a novel. And I liked that time. And, part of what I try to do now as a writer is to go back to that time, just shut out the business side of writing books and just go back to the end of the day. I want to write a book that I'd want to read, and then hopefully other people will agree if I've made it the best that I can, without trying to think about, well, where's the market going, and is this going to be popular? Are people going to like it as much as my other book? You really have to shut out those voices, because they will come at you afterwards. Like, for sure, any review, not any review, but lots of reviews of people who've read other my books are, they'll start off, oh, this is not my favorite of Mackenzie's, or she did better in this other book, so you just can't think about that. And then that might be somebody else's favorite book, right? So
Yeah.
because reading taste is so personal. So I think I honestly, I feel like I'd just leave her alone. She did okay. You know, she made a bunch of mistakes that helped her learn, and in the end, it turned out all right. And I think if you know how a story ends or a book ends, and hopefully it's not the end of my career, just the beginning of another phase. But I don't know if that's good for you. You know, I think it's good when
Yeah.
you don't know how it's going to end and keeps you turning the pages and working to get to whatever end you want. And I would say also that like I did not have a plan when I started all of this. Like it sounds ridiculous, but I was really only after I got my book deal and I had this call with the marketing director of HarperCollins Canada who was telling me about like being on Goodreads and Twitter and Facebook and all this stuff. And I was like, what have I done? I was like, I realized it was a job that, you know, so I always called it when I was still doing both things at the same time, that
Hmm.
it was my second job that I didn't need and never asked for. Um, so I mean, I liked it enough to keep at it. Obviously, I'm not complaining. I did it to myself, but I think that's good too. You know, for me anyway, it's what worked. And so I'd have some advice more for me later in my career, I have to say, but you know, because hindsight is 2020. But pre-published Catherine, she was fine.
She was fine.
She
Okay,
was
let her
fine. We can leave her alone.
leave her alone. Let her just go on the ride. No
Yes,
need.
yes.
Okay, I like that because that's kind of how I approach life. I don't want to know the ending, and I don't want to go back and change anything either. So, for sure. But before we get out of your writing life, I want to know: are you working on any other books? You know, what's going on? Are you working on anything now, or are you waiting? What can you tell us? Any early tidbits on anything?
Sure. I'm always writing. So I am almost finished my 2023 book, which right now is called Have You Seen Her?
Hmm.
And is loosely based on the Gabby Petito disappearance,
Ooh.
but told from the perspective of a search and rescue worker in Yosemite. So yeah, I'm in my phase of I've got 90% of it written and I've gone
Hmm.
back to the beginning to do a polish, fix things, look at like, you know, in the first chapters, oh yeah, this clue I put here or this or whatever, make sure that it's all tied up before I write the last couple of chapters. So that's what I'm doing for the next 6 weeks. But I've also have written a rom-com, gone back to my rom-com writing roots, and that's going to be published next year under a pseudonym. So
Ooh.
yeah, I'm excited about that too. So
I'm excited too. I'm excited. You know what? I'm actually enjoying when an author I've read in a genre kind of switches over to another genre. I don't know why. I'm just super fascinated about it.
well, I started out writing my
No.
first, yeah,
Yeah,
my first three novels were rom-coms. Um, and maybe a little bit darker than what is
yeah.
considered a rom-com now, but yeah, they you know they were books with relationships at the center of them, um and then the, you know, the market did shift, and my the stories I wanted to tell shifted as well,
Yeah.
and so I sort of transitioned into writing thrillers, which I still love doing, but I now only have one job, and so I have more time on my hands, and it's nice to tell a lighter story.
Hmm.
It's you know, when you write thrillers, you're living in a dark place, right?
Yeah.
Dead bodies and intrigue and mayhem, and yeah, so you know, it's nice to like write you know, happier stories with some comedy, and hopefully make people smile and laugh and, you know, feel the way they do when they watch Bridgerton or whatever.
Oh, I love it. No, I'm really excited because I know you have other books, you know, like you said, rom-coms, women
Yeah.
fiction, that sort of thing. I've never read them though. I just know you for thrillers. And so I'm very excited to kind of see the lighter side, as well. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to this one loosely based on, what happened to Gabby Petito because, you know, there's so many questions I had about that. And I think
Yeah.
fiction would be a great way for me to get some answers. So
There
this
you
is
go. Yeah, that whole
exciting.
thing was terrible, but yeah. Yeah,
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 it
yeah.
was terrible, but I think fiction always fills in the gaps for me. You know,
I got
it's
it.
not the true story, but you know, it kind of
Yeah,
gives
no.
me that closure.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's my version is like, wouldn't it be cool if this is what actually happened to her as
Yeah.
opposed to what did happen to her?
Right,
You
right.
know?
Okay. I love it. Well, thank you for the sneak peeks. So we have 2 books to look forward to next year. So
Next year, yeah.
that's great. Awesome. So even though we're here to talk about your book, please join us. I want to know what you're reading. I'd love to know the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned Bridgerton before. I went and read all the Bridgerton books in a flurry. I'm a little obsessed with season 2 and Anthony Bridgerton in particular. And anyway, so I was like, oh, whatever, I'll just read one of these books. And then, of course, I ended up reading all of them. So that was fun to dip into that world for a bit. And um, what else? What else? What else? I read so many books for blurbs that I'm often reading something like a year before it comes out.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm really looking forward to my friend Alyssa Friedland's book that's coming out, I think September 6th, and it's called The Most Likely Club. It's more women's fiction and sort of generational dramas that she excels in. And she's funny and witty and insightful. So that I really enjoyed that book, and it's coming out a couple weeks after mine. Um, and what else have I read recently? I mean, I've in the last couple of years or last year or so, I've read a couple of books that I really, really loved. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I thought was fantastic. And I also really like The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And they're kind of companion books in an odd way.
Hmm.
Um, and I think if you liked one, you'd like the other.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. But what
Yeah.
books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead? So books you haven't read yet, but you know about them and you're like, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading these.
Yeah, I think next up for me is Emily Henry's Beach Read, which just came out now. At the time this airs, it'll have been a couple of months. I think she's writing hugely successful rom-coms. I think she's a really strong writer. So I'm really looking forward to reading um, The Appeal by, or sorry, I really enjoyed reading The Appeal by Janice Hallett, and I got an early look at her next book, which is already out in the UK, um, but isn't out here yet. And then also got to read early Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan, who's a big audiobook narrator. And it's a great love story set in the audiobook world. So you get all that inside stuff um, that, when you get to see inside a profession, so fascinating. And then Ruth Wera has a new book out for me in a couple of weeks, and I'm really looking forward to read that. I've read everything that Ruth has published.
Awesome. So, in addition to loving books and authors, we love our local indie bookstores, and I ask all our guests on the show. So, of course, I want to know from you. I want you to share with our listeners some of your favorite local bookstores.
So I'm a big fan of Belmont Books in Boston, and I'm actually doing my launch event for Please Join Us there in August, on August 23rd. And Page 158 Books in Wake Forest. I also love the Bookstore Plus in Lake Placid in upstate New York. There's three bookstores that I love, but I am doing a independent bookstore book tour for my books, and all the information about that is on my website if you want to learn about some great independent bookstores, hopefully in your area, and maybe come see me too.
Yay, awesome. All right. So, getting back to Please Join Us. I mean, I know you've done your job as an author. You've written a book, you've given it to us. And I know it's really up to us readers to kind of make that last decision on it. But in an ideal world, Catherine, what reactions are you hoping for, or just some thoughts you're hoping readers might have after they turn the last page on Please Join Us?
Well, I always think, early in my career, I remember somebody telling me my first book came out, like, oh, I read it in 4 hours. And I was like, what? This thing I slaved over for 2 years? And I was upset. But I realized that it was actually a huge compliment, because that means that they were sucked in and nothing threw them out of the story. And, I still miss, it's so rare that I get to read like that anymore for one reason or another. But that was me as a kid. Like, you could talk to me when I had a book in my hand and I wouldn't hear you. And so I think to be able to recreate that experience for somebody is such a compliment, and what I'm trying to do. So that's what I hope. I hope that, somebody just feels like they can't put the book down and doesn't put it down and races to find out what happened, and is satisfied with what they get to in the end, hopefully surprised, but also satisfied. And so that's on the pleasure side of things. And then, there's always a little of a deeper message in my books. And I think that one of the themes I'm exploring, and please join us, is still this environment that exists for a lot of professional women, where, Me Too came to like the entertainment industry, but it has not come to the law profession. It has not come to the accounting profession. It has not come to many, many, many other professions. And it's not because the women don't have stories. Like, we all have stories, right? So, I think it's, to make people think about that a little bit, and to think about shaking up the status quo. And I mean, not taking things totally ridiculously far like the people in my books do. It's a thriller. It has to be exaggerated, but I think there is power in women banding together and making things happen. Because if we wait for men to make things happen for us, like, it's never going to happen. So
it's up to us. It's up to the women. And
yeah, I mean, we're tired, right? We're tired. It's so tired. We don't want to have to do it, but unfortunately, I think we still do. So
yeah, I agree. Absolutely. But Catherine, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to The Reader's Couch. You can find out more about the show and submit your questions for our guest by visiting our website, thereaderscouch.com. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Couch is Booked. If you like the show, please subscribe, share, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Next week, I'll be back with new guests, more books, and some fun games we can play. But until then, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.